Conspiracy theories about the assassination of Charlie Kirk exploded online in the hours and days after his death. A month later, they still persist. In this video, we'll unpack why they are so potent, uncover what they have in common with past assassination conspiracies, and expose the mechanics of how they go viral. I'm David Gilbert. I write about online extremism and the crisis of truth for Wired. Welcome to Disinfonation, the Charlie Kirk assassination conspiracies. Today I'm speaking with two experts on the spread of false narratives. Both are authors and researchers. Joan, Nina, thank you for joining us today. To get us started, can I just ask, over the last couple of weeks, what has been the most out there conspiracy that you have seen around the Charlie Kirk assassination?
One of the ones that I've seen that I think is kind of interesting and actually coming more from the left is that Charlie Kirk and his family are a psyop, that they aren't actually a real family and that they may be involved with the Freemasons as well.
Yeah, the one that I was really intrigued by had to do with that he wasn't even there. He was being projected as a hologram. And if he had been there, he may have ended up being trapdoored through some kind of underground tunnel.
I was actually at a conspiracy conference in Ireland in real life a couple of weeks ago. They had a tarot reader from Canada there, and she did a tarot reading. And the first question she was asked by someone in the audience from Ireland was Charlie Kirk really dead? And so she went and pulled her cards, and it turns out that he's not dead. And that, in fact, wasn't Charlie Kirk in the university being shot, but someone else.
I think conspiracies are often trying to give a balm to people during confusing events. They're a way for people to make sense of what's going on. And so it makes sense that folks would turn to tarot or turn to elaborate holograms to try to process what was going on.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this before. Tupac, Biggie, Elvis, Charlie Kirk, this idea that the people haven't really died. You can't believe your eyes in this case, but also that you can't believe government, you can't believe anything that you see or read, which is where you start to see the repetitive types of conspiracy theories come in. Not just Freemasons, which is a well-known trope, but also that Israel had something to do with it, or this was a military psyop from inside the government in some way to try to produce a martyr.
And we've literally seen President Trump and others calling Charlie Kirk a martyr.
He's a martyr now for American freedom.
So are there examples, do you think, from the past where we can see clearly that conspiracies from decades, centuries ago can also be applied to what's happening today?
So famously with the JFK assassination, there was always this claim of a second shooter, or the shot itself was something that never could have been made. And immediately after Kirk's assassination, you saw people sneaking back onto the campus of this university late at night and filming the area and trying to themselves see if that shot could be made from the top of the building to where Kirk was sitting. And so this notion of the impossible shot or the magic bullet is a tale that we've been through before.
That's an interesting point. And with JFK, there was the controversial theory that a second shot came from the grassy knoll. And similarly, videos now claim that Charlie Kirk would have been shot from a nearby window or balcony.
This would 100% line up with the actual shot from the backside of Charlie,
which is totally improbable. And of course, Tyler Robinson and Lee Harvey Oswald have both been labelled as patsies or scapegoats.
Well, even when we talk about Charlie Kirk's assassination potentially being a hologram, right? That's just a version of a false flag conspiracy theory, which we've seen with many different assassination attempts, from JFK to even the assassination attempt against President Trump during the 2024 election. We had prominent voices on the left suggesting that this might be a false flag to bolster his election chances.
There's a lot of claims that perhaps the deep state or others within the actual MAGA sphere had used Charlie Kirk as a sacrifice, and that it was to kick off this idea that Antifa and the radical left are the real perpetrators of mass violence. And we've seen similar things like this happen in the past, particularly when Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. There was a lapse of security that allowed that to happen. There was also claims that Booth had actually escaped and that the person that was caught was actually a cadet that looked like Booth, and he was quickly executed.
Right, and one popular conspiracy theory at the time accused elements within Lincoln's own government, specifically the radical Republicans like Edwin Stanton, of somehow aiding Booth to remove a conciliatory Lincoln in order to impose harsher Reconstruction punishments on the South. That to me feels like a 19th century version of a deep state conspiracy.
There's also, of course, conspiracies around the end of the Romanov dynasty in Russia. People still believe today that Princess Anastasia got out somehow, and there have been investigations into different people who claim they're Anastasia and their ears and their DNA. On the Freemasons, there's a huge community online that is now claiming that Erica Kirk is secretly a Freemason and she didn't give birth to her children because there have never been any pictures of her pregnant, or she doesn't show her children's faces. Well, as somebody who's received online harassment, I can understand why she doesn't show her children's faces.
What Nina's saying is very true. One actual disinformation story that circulated very quickly after Kirk's murder was that his wife and children were there, and they weren't. So this story that
I actually fell for that one.
Yeah, this story that his daughter was running towards him really tugs on the heartstrings. It's hard to believe someone would make up that kind of detail.
Let's talk about X a little bit, because that's where a lot of these conspiracies begin. I was looking back to September 10th when this happened, and I was trying to find when these conspiracies started. And I found a post, I think less than an hour after Kirk had been officially declared dead, blaming Israel for his death. And it didn't get much engagement. And loads of these posts were posted, but not much engagement. Within hours, though, they began to go viral. Can I ask you, how does something like that go viral? How does it get to the point or break containment from X to the point where the Israeli Prime Minister has to post a video online denying that Israel had anything to do with the shooting? How does that happen?
So in this case, with pushing this conspiracy theory that Israel was involved, you had a specific actor like Candace Owens, who was close to Charlie Kirk. It's someone that is familiar to the Turning Point USA crowd, someone that is quote unquote trusted within those circles. And she really came out in full force to make these associations.
The very day before Charlie Kirk died, he expressed that he thought he was going to be killed.
What she's been able to establish has been very controversial, but at the same time, she's starting to prove it out that there was this fissure with Charlie Kirk and Israeli donors where she had received a text message, and a lot of people denied the existence of these text messages until she published them. She claims to have more. But when you think about the actors behind this, is that you need some kind of protagonist to get the ball rolling. And then it moves from X over to YouTube, where she's primarily doing her nightly show. Then it's over on her Instagram, and then it's back to X, and then people start discussing her content, and then people share her content. And then algorithmically, you start to see it slowly get tied together so that when you look up Charlie Kirk, you end up with what's popular at the time, which is Candace Owens's explanation for who else might have been involved.
They said that there's probably somebody else involved. That sounds about right.
So one of the things that comes out with these Candace Owens tweets about Charlie Kirk's texts to her is these kind of underlying anti-Semitic tropes that Jewish people run politics, that they have a lot of money. And even Kirk himself says that Jewish donors play into all the stereotypes. So she's releasing these things selectively. And I think it's important to note that she is profiting from this. It is driving up ad revenue. And the more salacious stuff that she shares, if she keeps the drip, drip, drip of these text messages going, I mean, frankly, she's profiting from her friend's death.
I'm going to throw it to some sponsors.
And the platforms are profiting as well.
Right now, you can get 20% off your first order.
One of the things that people jumped on in the wake of his death were these kind of oddities, as people put them. For example, George Zinn, the 71-year-old man who was first arrested because he told people that he was the shooter. It turns out he wasn't. He had nothing to do with it. People have focused on the text messages that were in the affidavit that the police produced that just don't look natural, the text messages between the suspected shooter and his partner. They just don't read as natural. There was a man who looked as if he was giving hand signals, being pretty close to Charlie Kirk. Is that a key component to conspiracy theories generally, that there is a nugget of truth in there, that something did happen that is real, but people just take it in completely the wrong direction?
That's actually not only a nugget of conspiracy theories, that's a nugget of the best and most successful disinformation. It's not stuff that's just made up whole cloth. It is things that happen in real life, often fueled by real people's authentic grievances that are then taken out of context, amplified, or weaponized in some way.
One of the things that these conspiracy theories thrive on is this drive to rationalize things that are random. So you show this little clip of someone doing something like this, and you say, oh, this is instantly some kind of signal. And maybe it is. Maybe it's the all clear signal because you are a bodyguard and you're communicating to another bodyguard. I think one of the really interesting ones that happened in the 30 seconds after the shot rang out is that someone jumped up and grabbed the camera from behind Kirk and pulled that down. And I think it was obviously to try to stop the live stream and to make sure that if there was, like, God forbid, some kind of coordinated terror attack, you don't want them to be able to be watching what's happening on the ground while maybe they're laying in wait somewhere else on campus to shoot at students or whatnot. So there was this moment where anything anybody was doing was interpreted as somehow trying to collude or hide. But this notion of just asking questions, there's some recent psychology research that it does create a truth bias for people. So if you see the same questions being asked across different platforms and by different people, you start to believe, well, maybe this is true because everybody's asking these questions.
Right, and Joe Rogan in particular is a master of this rhetorical strategy of just asking questions. Here he is on his podcast, which reaches a huge mainstream audience.
You're telling me that this kid who's not military trained, this guy, first of all, how did he get to the roof? How come nobody was looking?
And so it's not just a rhetorical strategy to quote unquote just ask questions as part of being an online influencer and to drag the story out, but also it can be a way of slowly persuading people as to what you want them to conclude.
So because people no longer believe what they are hearing from mainstream media or even from law enforcement at this point, because trust in these institutions has cratered in recent years, that does then leave the way open for other people to take advantage and to post videos showing things that just didn't really happen.
Absolutely. When you raise the specter of just asking questions, was this camera here? Was he wearing a blood pack? Was he wearing a bulletproof vest? You're not only potentially driving clout and driving views on these platforms, but many of these folks are monetizing their videos, right? So if you raise these salacious allegations, you know that it's playing right into the infrastructure of these algorithms, which rewards those salacious allegations with more views, more clicks, more engagement, and more ad revenue, frankly.
So there's an MIT study from 2018 that says lies travel further and faster than the truth on Twitter especially. Part of this is because it's so lucrative to have a scoop and to be first. And so we often see Photoshops, very weirdly cropped images. We've seen quite a few different deepfakes of Charlie Kirk's voice, even from beyond the grave.
Right. An AI-generated audio clip of Kirk was played in various services, such as this one.
Death is not the end. It's a promotion. Don't waste 1 second mourning me.
But going back to what you said, Nina, I've even seen a few altered images that claim that Charlie Kirk was wearing a blood pack, which also seems to have an AI voiceover.
What's protruding out of Charlie's back?
But if you compare this image with a real photo taken by a photographer at the same moment, you can clearly see that this theory is false, but intentionally false.
You see these cheap fakes. People might augment the picture in such a way or stretch a frame so that it looks disproportionate. And knowing that things that are novel and outrageous travel at breakneck speed due in part to the infrastructure of the algorithms rewarding that novelness. It's like we've built an entire algorithmic system on many of these platforms around the idea that whoever has the most bizarre and outrageous information are going to be the ones that are circulated the most.
And we know the most engaging content online is often the most enraging content. So you have people searching for answers, people who are shocked and scared and pissed off, and that is just the perfect fuel for conspiracy theories.
When I saw the video, it was horrific and it really upset me, but there were dozens, hundreds, thousands of posts showing the video, tens of millions, hundreds of millions probably viewed it. In fact, by the time Kirk was pronounced dead 2 hours later, the videos posted by people at the rally had more than 11 million views. My colleague at Wired, Lauren Good, pointed out that we are pretty much living in a post-content moderation world. Nina, thoughts?
Certainly with the advent of the paid-for blue check on X, where your content can be surfaced to more people and you can gain virality, gain amplification, gain credibility by posting the more inflammatory content that does well on X, I think Musk has opened up a new industry for folks to engage in harmful and violent rhetoric, and in some cases even traffic in violent videos, right? That's the moment that we're in.
I think a really important point from the point of view of the shooter is that they waited till the live stream was on, right? And this is a really important and salient point, which is that they wanted to spread the trauma. It wasn't necessarily about just killing Kirk. It was about doing it in front of an audience. It was about doing it in a way that would be mediated and distributed.
One thing that I think is important to dig deeper on is the way that these violent videos are often remixed, or even people attempt to evade content moderation by flipping, inverting kind of the image, changing a filter on it. All of that generates what's called a different hash. So it makes it more difficult for the platforms to identify and remove these videos. And let's be clear, posting a video of a murder is not speech, right? This goes against most of the platforms' terms of service.
That's an interesting point. The platforms have stepped back in recent years. For example, TikTok recently announced it will lay off hundreds of human content moderators in favor of increased AI-enabled content moderation. Does that play an important role in the fact that there is now zero friction effectively for anyone who wants to spread not only those horrible videos that you reference, Nina, but also any sort of disinformation that they may choose to post online?
Yeah, and I think it's important to put out there that the same people whose job it would be to regulate these companies in this industry are the ones who are also benefiting from the spread of this disinformation.
Musk and the platform executives know this is how their platforms work, right? And with Elon Musk in particular, you have something really peculiar going on where not only is this guy profiting from disinformation and from conspiracy theories, he himself is adding fuel to the fire. And I think that's totally intentional. We know that Elon wants X to be the place where news happens and news breaks. So if in the moments after the shooting, he's able to say, well, it was them, the left did it, the violent left. That really adds to people flocking to his platform, using it, commenting there, and it adds to the usage metrics for them, which I think all of these platform executives have in mind, but for Musk, it's particularly insidious given his own usage of his platform and his recognition of how it works.
So on that point, we saw a lot of people questioning why the video of his actual death was posted online so much. What's the driving force? You mentioned money. Is there other forces there that make people want to post about this so much that their first instinct is, I need to go on TikTok or I need to go on Instagram or X and give my opinion to the world?
Well, even the nation's top law enforcement official felt the need to post through it with Kash Patel. A lot of the commentary in the days after the assassination, when they still hadn't found the shooter, was perhaps we shouldn't have online influencers leading law enforcement. But I really do think it's important to note what a cash cow this is for so many conspiracy theorists online. The idea that Charlie Kirk is a psyop, I found that through the Substack algorithm. That was fed to me by somebody who claims that they're just doing research. This person has over 78,000 subscribers on Substack, and that's all monetized. And the more that they push this information out, the more that they're driving subscriptions, the more that they can continue to cash in on these horrible events.
I think also, when we get down to it, images like this, which are something that gets massively distributed, You get called in as a user and as a witness into action. You are now part of the manhunt. This is what made QAnon so powerful. Every day you could be part of the analysis, and you could be making videos like this and like circling this little wisp of whatever is going by here. But what's important here is that you become a detective. I think one of the things that we really misunderstand about the media ecosystem, especially around the right, is that if you are a right winger, one of the most important things you can do as a political participant in the world is share right-wing media content. You are not the audience, you are the distribution system. Right-wing media share each other's information and articles. You would just never see the New York Times sharing the Washington Post. So mainstream media has a different business model than right-wing media, where these kind of narratives tend to thrive.
Is there specific phrases or red flags that people should be wary of and not look at that stuff and look maybe at more fact-checked stuff? For me, when I hear words like 100% incontrovertible proof, that's an immediate red flag.
One of the things that I think is important to recognize is that all of us are human. All of us make mistakes. So anybody who is claiming definitive knowledge in a breaking news situation is probably full of shit. Until you see something corroborated on multiple sources from multiple people of different backgrounds and political viewpoints, I wouldn't trust it.
We have to be much more astute news consumers. I also am in favor of what I call everyone is a journal-ish. So I think that most people that use social media these days, they have to think, how do I know if this is true? And what are the stakes if I'm wrong?
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Joan and Nina, thank you so much for your insights. Conspiracy theories have been with us for decades, from Area 51 to the JFK assassination and even the moon landing. But the Charlie Kirk assassination has shown us that conspiracy theories today are not only big business, they are instant, supercharged by the algorithmic world that we live in, and given credence by some of the most powerful people in the world. Sorting fact from fiction in breaking news situations is becoming increasingly difficult. And that's even before we have entered the era of the AI conspiracy theory. I'm David Gilbert. Thanks for watching.